The purpose of this course is to give you the necessary skills to deal with wills and estates. It's a very practical course, as you can relate to it also on a personal level. One way or the other, we have dealt with a situation where there is death at the family, the friends, the neighbors. So this course is all about that. But our purpose as UNISA is to make sure that when somebody shares that you have a certificate in deceased estate, they'll have confidence that you can provide them with advice on the subject and the correct advice. So by so saying, no one can pass this course and be surprised as to how did I pass this course. You are not going to say how I passed that course. No. You are going to learn and gain the necessary knowledge or skill and be proud at the end of the day that you have acquired those skills in this course, so that you are free to give advice to people in the outside world. Not so. When people share that we have a certificate in deceased estate, they must not say, no, everyone can do it. No, not this one. You want it to have weight. Ne? Those people who are not sure what to do, you cannot come to them and say, no, if you don't know what to do and you want a certificate, go to UNISA, you'll get a certificate in deceased estate. I think by now you know what I'm talking about regarding the assignments that you have submitted. All those who did not do well in the assignment, it's not because, let me use the harsh word, it's not because you are stupid. It's because you did not find sufficient time to go through the manual. Because you cannot reach this stage and be stupid to pass an examination. This thing needs time. You are very busy and all those things. The only thing is for you to get time to go through the manual so that you can answer those questions and pass. Not so? Yes. Now we are going to prepare for the examination. This is the purpose of this workshop. Now with the first module, now we are getting into the meat of the subject now. With the first module, you did the drafting of wills. Ne? And in the drafting of wills, you were guided by the Wills Act. You have to draft a valid will. Ne? And if you don't draft a will and you die, what happens? Your estate will devolve intestate. Not so. And if it devolves intestate, then you are guided by another piece of legislation which is the Intestate Succession Act. It's unfortunate that we are dealing with the assets of people who have died, but there's no other way. We have to deal with them. Ne? And because we are dealing with the subject matter, let's try to make it lively and interesting. Ne? Now, when a person dies, it's either he dies having made a will, which is valid in terms of the Wills Act, or if does not have a will, then he dies intestate. But the estate of that person has to be administered. That is where now Module 2 comes in. Ne? Module 1 was to prepare you of what should happen to your assets after you have died. In other words, you are giving instructions for all the assets that you have accumulated in your lifetime. Ne? In your lifetime, you can give instruction as to who must get what from you. But when you are dead, no one can do that except you through the will. Unfortunately, there comes the time that you have died. Not you. I'm just saying, the testator. Ne? And now we have to administer the estate. Why should we do that? So that there can be order in winding up your estate. And in doing so, we are going to be guided by another piece of legislation, which is what? The Administration of Estate Act. That is Module 2 now. Now, when a person dies, the estate must be administered in terms of the Administration of Estate Act. Now, in the winding up of the estate, there are important parties that are involved. And who are those parties? The executor. The executor is one of them. Let's see here what we can use. Yeah. The executor, I'll just abbreviate. And you said the master of the High Court. Who else? The heirs. The heirs with an H, ne? The heirs. And who else? SARS. Yeah, SARS is very important. SARS. And who else? The creditors. Let's stop at this. We'll add others if you want to. Now, these are those important people in the winding up of the estate. The person that we have drafted a will, as per Module 1, comes to you now as per the Module 2. After crying for the deceased, now that person has paused because now he wants to get the assets of the deceased. Those are the family members. Among all these important people, the master is the one who's going to supervise the administration of this estate. That is why the master is so important. Is going to supervise the administration of the estate. Therefore, in your first consultation with the family members, when they come to you, you are going to obtain the necessary information from them. What is the purpose of the information? Firstly, is to report the estate to the master. Secondly, is to wind up the estate. Now, let us concentrate on the first part of reporting the estate to the master. After we have gathered all the information, there are certain documents that you must lodge with the master to report the estate. I think by now you know those documents. In your assignment number 3, there is a part that deals with all the documents. I don't want to repeat them. You fill in those documents. Now, there are 2 types of the appointment that can be made by the master. When you send the reporting documents to the master can then make an appointment of the master's representative or the executor. Under what circumstance can the master make the appointment of the master's representative? If the value of the estimated estate is less than 250,000. Wonderful. Yeah? Then the master will issue what we call the letters of authority. Yeah? So the master regards that as more or less an easy estate that could be wound up without following all those steps that will be followed by the executor. The executor will be appointed by the master where the value is above 250,000. Now be careful in the examination. When we say, give us the reporting documents where the value of the estate is less than 250,000, there are 1 or 2 documents that are not the same with those ones that are required when you want to be the executor. The documents are more or less the same, except for 1 or 2. Ne? I think by now you know them. Ne? Okay. Now, when you fill in this document to send it to the master, then the master, where the value of the estate, how will we know that the estimated value of the estate is less than 250 or more than 250? There is one important document that we call an inventory. In that inventory, the master will make his decision based on it, because that is where you are going to cover what? Your immovable property, movable property, and claims in favor of the estate. It is not necessary at this point to reflect the liabilities. Yeah? Now, we are looking at the estate where the value is above 250,000. Which master will have jurisdiction to deal with that estate? We have dealt with that in your assignment under section 4. The jurisdiction of the master, where the deceased was resident. After the master has issued the letters of executorship, ladies and gentlemen, what are the duties of the executor?
Take control of the estate.
Aha. The most important thing is that Section 26 of the Administration of Estate Act says the executor must take full control of the assets in the estate. So that situation of the uncles who will come and do as they like with the estate of the deceased or should not be allowed, because it is the duty of the executor to do what? To take full control of the assets of the deceased. Why the executor? It is Section 13 of the Administration of Estate Act says no one must deal with the estate of the deceased without the authority from the master. That is why the uncles cannot do that if they are not the executors. So the executor is the one who, in terms of Section 26, must take full control of the assets in the estate. Now, let me use this part. We said Section 26, take full control of the assets in the estate. And what else must the executor do? Remember, the winding of the estate is a step-by-step process until you finalize it. There's nothing difficult. There's nothing magical. It's just a practical thing. The executor steps into the shoes of the deceased and deal with the estate. Then you find out there is monies that comes in that belongs to the estate. What do you do with them as the executor? Remember, you are required by Section 28 to do what? To open an estate bank account. So all the monies must go into the estate bank account. Why can't this money be deposited to your business account or trust account as an attorney, because you are winding up the estate anyway? The reason why you cannot take the money into your business or trust account is because the trust account is open in terms of you being a legal practitioner and in terms of the Legal Practitioners Act. But you are the executor in terms of the Administration of Estate Act. So therefore, the Administration of Estate Act instructs you to open an estate check account in terms of Section 28. So when all the monies in the estate come, Section 28 says as soon as the amount is above 1,000, then you must open this account. Now, how do we deal with it practically? All the monies that come in here, and you find that there's a lot of money in this estate, and you feel that you want to invest some of the money. Remember, when you take the decision to invest the money, you invest it in the interest of the estate, not in the interest of the executor. No. So you are allowed to invest the surplus in the estate account. But as soon as you have to pay the liabilities in the estate, yes, ma'am.
Stupid question, sir. Client asked, why are we opening up a check account? And you've made emphasis to open up an estate check account. Why not a savings account where there's lesser charges instead of a check account where there's more charges as compared to a savings account?
Well, Section 28 talks of a check account. Remember, we are guided by the Act as to how must we administer the estate. Now, that savings is the one where you can save money, the surplus. And that is what Section 28 says. As soon as you have to pay the liabilities in the estate, you cannot pay it from the investment that you have opened or a savings that you have saved money. Monies must be transferred back into the estate check account. It's the check account because then at the end of the day, you must do what? Account to the interested parties what the monies have done. Also, when you finalize the estate, the master requires you to close the account and submit all the checks as proof as to this was done for the purpose of the estate. Unlike the savings account where you'll just have a card and swipe. So there are chances of you taking 50 cents into your pocket and no one can spot that, you know? Yeah. Maybe that is why Section 28 emphasizes on a check account. Yeah? But you cannot pay monies from the investment account. So you must transfer money back to the check account and then you can pay. Yeah? So that is the part which is very practical so that you become aware. Yeah? Then what do you do next as the executor? You are going to advertise in terms of Section 29. Where do you advertise? Government Gazette and the newspaper. Ne? For what period must this advert lie? For the period of 30 days. Minimum of 30 days. Ne? Usually we simplify it and say 30 days. But it's the minimum of 30 days, maximum of 3 months. Ne? And what do you say in this account? So in this advertisement, you are calling all the creditors to can lodge their claims against the estate. Not so. Okay? Then what do you do next? We have called them to lodge their claims. Are you going to close your file now and wait for the expiry of the 30-day period? No. There are certain assets that you are not going to turn into cash, that you are not going to sell. Ne? You get valuations of those assets. Because now you have to get the value of the assets in the estate so that you can compare that with the liabilities in the estate. Not so. Because after the 30-day period has lapsed and the creditors have lost their claims, let's say for argument's sake, there is this creditor who comes late after 30 days. What do you do with the creditor that lodges the claim after the expiry of the notice? Are you going to reject the claim as the executor? Are you going to accept it? Yes. You are going to accept it. But how will you deal with this late claim? Late claim, you are going to deal with it in terms of Section 31. Section 31 tells you how to deal with late claims as the executor. You are going to accept the claim. And if the filing of the late claim causes you to redraft the L&D account, ne? And that you have to pay the cost thereof, the cost will be borne by the creditor who lost the claim late. Ne? So that is what Section 31 says. It's so nice to say, creditors, come and lodge your claims and I'm giving you 30 days. And they lost their claims. Are you going to accept all the claims that are lodged? There are those that are dodgy, not so. And we are not going to easily accept them. But then you will be guided by the family members and say, it's for the first time that you hear about this person. Ne? We are doubting his claim. How will you deal with the claim that you are disputing? Remember, we are administering this estate as guided by the Administration of Estate Act. Ne? So if you need guidance, then you rush to the Administration of Estate Act, you look at Section 32. Section 32 tells you that you are going to ask for this creditor to submit an affidavit in support of his or her claim. And then, with the consent of the master, you can also call this creditor to a meeting. To do what? To be questioned by the master and by you as the executor, or by the heirs in the estate or their lawyers. Section 32 allows that process. And after you have questioned the creditor and you feel that as the executor you are still not satisfied with the claim, what will you do? Obviously, you are going to reject that claim. Ne? When you reject that claim, Section 33 tells you that you must notify that creditor in writing that you are rejecting the claim. So you don't just pick up a phone and say, you know what, all your questions, man, I am not satisfied. In fact, I'm deciding to reject your claim. So we are not going to do that. Ne? Because Section 33 says you must notify that creditor in writing. Are we together? So now we have dealt with the claims of the creditors. And the 30, yes, sir.
Sorry, sir. Just to come back to the time period, the 30 days now. What is an acceptable period to allow rate claims? In other words, you drafted your L&D account, it's after a year, now all of a sudden you get a claim into your estate.
Yes.
Are you allowed to continue with that claim, or can you reject it as well?
No. You must accept the claim. That is why we are saying that.
You have to accept it.
Yes.
Doesn't matter,
That,
3 years, 4 years down the line.
as long as you have not completed the estate.
All right, but if the estate has already been finalized, master's final.
No, but if the estate is finalized, then, yeah.
All right. No, it was just interesting because I had a claim coming onto the estate that was finalized now.
Yes.
And we got a hell of an argument on that one.
No.
I said, we're not-
It's worse because after you have been discharged as being an executor, therefore, it's very late. There's nothing that you can do. Yes. Yeah. Any other question?
And if you don't have insufficient funds, so you're almost done, you're just sitting there with 2,000 rand, you get a 3,000 rand claim, what happens? Do you give them the 2,000 rand you're left with? Or how do you balance out the 3,000 that's been claimed in the 2,000 you're left with?
Remember that the administration of estate gives you the power as the executor to can negotiate with the creditor as to how much can be satisfied as payment. Now, if I'm only left with 200 rands, and I've paid others and it's not their fault, and then if he accepts the 200, then it's fine. Then we'll settle the debt. Ne? Yeah. But if there's nothing we can do. And that creditor cannot run around to the people who have been paid.
Yes.
Ne? Lawfully. He cannot do that. Yes. Ne?
So it's wrong to go back to the S and say there's a new claim?
No, you can't. As long as you lodge your claim late. Ne? Yeah. Now you are at that stage where you know the values of the assets in the estate. And the 30-day period has lapsed. So what do? You are going to determine the solvency of the estate. But what do you mean by determining the solvency of the estate? That is where now you are going to see whether are the liabilities more than the assets, or are the assets more than the liabilities? Now you determine that solvency of the estate as guided by Section 34. Section 34 gives us a situation where the executor has to deal with an insolvent deceased estate. Ne? So if there are more liabilities than assets, therefore that estate is insolvent. Deal with it in terms of Section 34. Ne? Now, we are going to work on the premise that the estate has more assets than liabilities. So we are dealing with the solvent deceased estate. And at this stage, please note that we don't intend to ask you any question in the exam regarding Section 34, as long as you know what it talks about. Ne? By the way, we have not yet prepared the examination. We'll prepare the exam after we get your inputs as to what you want to have in that exam, so that you don't fail it. You'll tell us. But at least for now, know what Section 34 deals with. Ne? Now, the estate is solvent. What do you do next? You remember that you have to lodge what we call the liquidation and distribution account to the master. Within what period?
6 months.
Yeah. 6 months from when? Yeah. In the exam, when we ask you, when should you lodge the liquidation and distribution account to the master? You have to answer that question in full, because when you say 6 months, we are not sure whether you know that it's 6 months from the date of death or from the date of issue of letters of executorship. So you have to state 6 months from the date of issue of letters of executorship. If you cannot lodge the account within 6 months, what are you going to do? We are going to request for an extension. Therefore, that answer as to when should you lodge the liquidation and distribution account, you are going to lodge it within 6 months from the issue of letters of executorship, or within such further extended period as allowed by the master. Ne? So that question will have more or less 2 marks. Ne? Within 6 months from issue of letters of executorship, or within such extended period as allowed by the master. That is the full answer to that question. Yeah? And still on that, what if you cannot lodge the account within the 6 months period? What are you going to do? Like what we have said, we can ask you this straightforward question, where now you have to explain to us in the examination. What will you do if you cannot lodge the account in time? You have to write to the master, request for an extension. Ne? And what are you going to say to the master in your request for an extension? Whatever you're going to say, ladies and gentlemen, fortunately, remember that each and every act has its own regulation. Even the Administration of Estate Act has its own regulations. So there are amendments that you must make in your application to the master for an extension. Those circumstances are stated in Regulation 6. You must know Regulation 6 for the purpose of the exam. Because then you must tell the master, why can't you lodge the account in time? What have you done so far in expediting to resolve that problem? And what progress have you made in the estate itself? How much money is there in the estate? Also tell the master whether the estate is still solvent. And if necessary, say to master, why can't you at least lodge an interim liquidation and distribution account? So all those things are provided to you under Regulation 6. You must know Regulation 6. Are we together? Don't forget, in your application to the master, you must indicate how much period do you still require. Don't let the master say, I'm going to give you 1 month or 2 months. No, you must say to the master, I'm requesting a further 3 months or 4 months to lodge the account. Guide the master in your request. So it's either will ask you a straightforward question as to what you will do to request for an extension, or we can say, write a letter to the master. Yeah, we can say so. Write a letter to the master requesting for an extension to lodge the liquidation and distribution account. Are we together? So we can share that part is very important because it's very practical. It is not always the case in practice where you will be spot on to lodge the account within 6 months. So when you deal with estate, you are going to time and again have to request for an extension. That is why it's so important even to us. That is why you have to know it. And that is why we want to test it. Are we together? Yes. Okay. What can make you to sell all the assets in the estate? Instruction from the will that we have drafted in Module 1. If the testers say, these are my properties, I've worked for them. These children must also work for their properties. My properties, sell them all. Just give them cash. Then they'll decide what to do. Then we're going to sell as executors as per the instructions of the testator in the will. When will it be necessary for us to enter into what you call a Section 38 takeover? That is where there is a surviving spouse, and the surviving spouse wants to take over, in most cases, the family home, in order also to cater for the minor children in the family home. Then we consider that Section 38 takeover. Yes, ma'am.
I have a case currently where we want to do this, but one of the things says that the unabated beneficiaries, the children, have to consent to it.
It's the master who must confirm and consent. But the minor children cannot consent.
But they are not minor.
Oh.
It's actually the oldest son
Yes.
who believes that, according to the culture, that he is entitled to the house, even though his mom is staying there with his sister and she's looking after the mom. And he doesn't want to.
Yeah, that's another thing. Those who feel that they are entitled because they are the elder son and there is no will, point them to the Interstate Succession Act. Ne? But with regard to the Section 38 takeover, the master must consent to the Section 38 takeover. Can the creditors form part of your Section 38 takeover? No. Ne? So those are your methods of liquidation. Ne? Then after that, as the executor, you are ready to do what? To draft your liquidation and distribution account. You are required to draft that liquidation and distribution account in terms of Section 35. Ne? We'll come back to it. Ne? After you have drafted that account, we are going to send it to the master. Now we are dealing with the step-by-step process of finalizing the estate by the executor. We'll come back to the account. You take that account to the master. Remember, the master is one of the most important persons. He supervises the administration of the estate. The master will check whether this account conforms to the law. I'll come and deal with the law later. Ne? And if the master is satisfied, the master will give you permission to do what? To advertise this account, ne? To the interested parties. Now you are going to advertise this account. Where will you advertise in terms of Section 35? Government Gazette, newspaper. For what period this time around? 21 days. And what do you say in this advertisement? You are asking the interested parties to come and inspect your liquidation and distribution account. And if they have an objection, to lodge that objection within 21 days. Are we together? Then after the expiry of the 21-day period, and there are no objections because this account was drafted by the person who was in this class and he knows how to draft that account. The master is satisfied, everybody is satisfied. The 21-day period has lapsed. What do? You give effect to your liquidation and distribution account. Whatever is stated in that liquidation and distribution account, you give effect to. In other words, you pay the creditors and you pay the beneficiaries, you transfer properties to the beneficiaries. And after doing that, then you go back to the master and report what you have done in the estate. You close the bank account, you give proof to the master that you have transferred properties, you give proof to the master that you have paid the creditors and the S. What proof can you give to the master that you have paid the creditors and the beneficiaries in the estate? What proof? Bank statements. The return checks. That is why we have opened an estate check account. The receipts. But the master will be satisfied if you can provide him with an affidavit. There is an affidavit by the executor. Also, that affidavit, you draft it in terms of section 35 in brackets 12. Ne? There is an affidavit that you draft in terms of section 35 in brackets 12. Ne? Where you say that we have paid the creditors and the heirs in the estate. So that one will be sufficient. But before you can draft that affidavit, at least you must have proof in your file. Ne? You must make the creditors and the beneficiaries to sign that they have received their monies. Ne? They must sign the acknowledgement of receipt. So that tomorrow when they come and say, no, but then you did not pay us, and now we have given the master an affidavit that we have given them the money, and you don't have proof. Ne? So those...
Did they send you an email
Today?
confirming they've received the funds and file now?
No, make them, just prepare for them an acknowledgement of receipt.
Okay.
Let them sign it and keep it in your file. Yes. You don't want to be a dispute by the time when now there is doubt in the payment. You want everything to be in your control. Yeah. Yeah? And if the master is satisfied that we have wound up the estate nicely in terms of the law, then the master will discharge you as being an executor. Yeah? Before the master can issue you a discharge in terms of section 56, you are still the executor. Yeah? So keep on making follow-ups to the master and say, Master, are you satisfied with what I've done? Are you satisfied with what I've given you? Can you discharge me? Yeah? And then you'll get the discharge. So those are step-by-steps that are taken by the executor in finalizing the estate. We can still go back to section 35 and say, what if there are objections? If there are objections, the objections must be raised with the master. The person who is making an objection, ladies and gentlemen, must lodge that objection in writing, and it must be in duplicate. The master will keep one document and send the other one to the executor. And the executor is given 14 days to respond to the objection. If the objection is valid, then you'll be forced to amend as per that objection. You amend to a liquidation and distribution account. Are we together? Yeah. Are we fine with the step by step? So that is module 2 for you. Now let's go back to section 35. Section 35 in brackets 1 says, as the executor, you must draft what we call the liquidation and distribution account. Now, this liquidation and distribution account is also important for you for the purpose of the exam. There's no way you can go to this exam without drafting that account. I think you know by now. Ne? Yes. We agree, Mus. Yeah. Now, the drafting of the liquidation and distribution account, ladies and gentlemen, is not a punishment to the executor. Ne? As the executor, you have to account to what you are dealing with in the estate. And you can do that in the form of drafting the liquidation and distribution account. That is why all these interested parties will come and inspect your liquidation and distribution account. So you have those people in mind. Without the liquidation and distribution account, you can never finalize an estate. That is why this account is very important. Ne? Now, section 35(1) says you must draft this account in a prescribed form. Ne? So you are not going to do as you wish. Yeah. Ne? You must do it according to the prescribed form. And what is that form? Ne? Now we are going to deal with that form. Ne? That guides you as to how should you draft the liquidation and distribution account. Now let's see what that form will look like. Who can tell us what is the form of drafting the liquidation and distribution account as required by the section 35(1)?
The first thing is the heading.
Yeah. That form is provided to us. You know, the nice thing about winding up the estate, you are guided all the way. Ne? Now, Regulation 5 in brackets 1 guides us as to how must we draft your liquidation and distribution account. Is a prescribed form that Section 35(1) talks about. Are we together? Now, we are going to look at this Regulation 5.1 and draft our liquidation and distribution account. Now, when you look at this regulation, Regulation 5.1a, what does it say? Now we are dealing with the form of the liquidation and distribution account as required by the Act. Regulation 5.1a tells us that our liquidation and distribution account must have what we call a heading. Not so? Yeah. It is not a decision to put a heading. Ne? It's a regulation. Ne? Now, Regulation 5.1b tells us that our liquidation and distribution account must have what we call a money column. There must be a money column. And what is that? That is where you're going to reflect the assets and your liabilities in that money column. If you don't have the money column in the exam, don't expect to get any marks because we did not request notes on the liquidation and distribution account. We have requested for an account. An account must have a money column. We'll just simply say, please comply with Regulation 5.1b. Ne? We want the money column. We must not go searching for the values in your notes. No. Ne? Yeah. It is a requirement. Regulation 5.1c, what is it? Your liquidation account. We'll come back to them one by one. Yeah? Regulation 5.1d, what is it? Recapitulation statement. Ne? Recapitulation statement. Regulation 5.1e, what is it? The distribution account. Not so. Is the distribution account. Regulation 5.1f. What is Regulation 5.1f? Income and expenditure account. Income and expenditure account. Regulation 5.1g. What is it? The fiduciary assets account. Fiduciary assets account. Regulation 5.1h is what? Estate duty account. Estate duty, or you prefer to call it addendum. No, it's fine. Ne? And Regulation 5.1i is the executor's certificate. Who must sign the executor's certificate? The executor himself or herself, or the agent of the executor. If the agent of the executor signs this certificate, then when we send this thing to the master, we must also do what? Attach special power of attorney. Don't forget that. Yeah? Wonderful. So Regulation 5.1a up to Regulation 5.1i is your liquidation and distribution account. Are we together, ladies and gentlemen? That is the prescribed form that is referred to in Section 35(1). This is the one. Ne? Now, let's take it one by one. This form that we're talking about. Regulation 51A, the heading. What goes into this heading? Yes. What goes into the heading is what is provided to us in Regulation 51A. We look at Regulation 51A. Regulation 51A tells us that we must call all this form a liquidation and distribution account. It's not my decision. It's Regulation 51A. It says call this a liquidation and distribution account. And this account of yours must have what we call an ordinal number. What is an ordinal number? Whether this is the first account or the second account or the third account. That is why we say the first and final liquidation and distribution is because we are guided by Regulation 51A. Regulation 51A tells us that we must give the full name of the deceased. Please don't just call him John. Yeah, or Joey, no. It's John Smith. So we must give the full name of the deceased, and we must provide the ID number of the deceased. It's a requirement of the regulation. Now, in the exam, if you give us the full name, we don't have the ID number, you lose a mark. That is why we are here, to correct all these things when we go to the exam. We don't want to lose those marks. So if you give the full name, you don't give the ID number, you lose a mark. Every mark is important in this course. Regulation 51A says you must also state the date of death. It's another mark. Regulation 51A also says you must mention whether the deceased was married or not. And if the deceased was married, the regulation says you must state whether he was married in or out of community of property. The regulation says if the deceased was married in community of property, give the full name of the spouse,
The ID number of the spouse.
and the ID number. And if the spouse has a maiden name, provide the maiden name. And we know in most cases the surviving spouse has a maiden name. Who is the surviving spouse? It's the wife. The wife will always be the surviving spouse.
So if there's a middle name, Notobeko, John, what, the
In-
name and the last name, and the...
In the brackets, then you say the maiden name.
Okay, do you lose a point if you just provide the marriage name?
Because you did not comply with the regulation. The regulation wants that. Now, that is why we are here, ma'am. So you are not going to be surprised and say, but why? We know, because now we are clarifying it, not so. The regulation says, if the surviving spouse has a maiden name, provide the maiden name. So therefore, it's the full name of the spouse, maiden name, and the ID number. Because even the master has the right to query your LNG and say, what is the maiden name of the surviving spouse? And you don't want your liquidation and distribution account to be queried by the master. Not so. Regulation 51A says, if the deceased was married out of community of property, also provide tell us whether it was with or without the accrual system. So if you say the deceased was married out of community of property and then you don't mention whether it was with or without the accrual system, you lose a mark. Yes. Because you did not comply with the regulation. Because we want to know all this information is important to the master. Because if the deceased was married out of community of property with the accrual system, we want that to be reflected in your account itself. So that is why the master would like to know, moreover, as required by the regulation. But the regulation does not state the name of the surviving spouse if the deceased was married out of community or property. But there's no problem if you can state the name of the surviving spouse. It's just that you won't allocate a mark for it. Ne?
Damn, I thought you could get more.
So there's no problem if you mention that the surviving spouse is so and so. But you don't allocate a mark. And then Regulation 5.1a also says you must mention the master's reference number. Where do you get the master's reference number from? How will we know the master's reference number of the estate you are dealing with? Exactly, from the letters of executorship. Every time when you communicate with the master, you use that reference number. That is in your letters of executorship. If you provide the street address, there's no problem. It's just that we won't give you a mark for that because it's not a requirement of the regulation. We allocate marks as directed by the regulation. That is why if you did not put the address, the master has no legal standing to query why didn't you put the address. You can say to the master, it's not a requirement of the regulation. Are we together? Yes. But if you don't put the date of death, the master can query that and say, please comply with Regulation 5.1a. Regulation 5.1a says you must also mention if you are dealing with a must estate. You have dealt with the must estate in Module 1. Ne? So you know what we are talking about. Ne? And if you are dealing with the must estate, Regulation 5.1a says you must also tell us the name of the person who's adiating the terms of the will. Where there is massing, there will be adiation. That is where now you must provide the name of the person who is adiating. Usually, it will be the surviving spouse. So that is the requirement of Regulation 5.1a. That is why you say the first and final liquidation and distribution account of John Smith, ID number, who died on this day and who was married out of community or property without the accrual system. Master's reference number. And then you get your marks. Any question on Regulation 5.1a? So we don't do as we please. We are guided. So when you draft this account, even in practice, look at Regulation 5.1a. It's very important. Any question on Regulation 5.1a? Your question should be, under what circumstance will you submit only the first account? You will submit the first account if you are submitting to the master an interim account. Ne? So it's not a final account. In the meantime, while you are still dealing with other things, you are ready to submit the first account. You call it the first liquidation and distribution account. Later on, when we finalize everything, then we'll say the second final liquidation and distribution account. Because the second one will be the final one. Ne? When will you term your heading as an amended account? Okay. If you send the account to the master and the master queries something and you have to reload that account, are you going to amend that account? Are you going to call it an amended account? No. You send it in the original way. Ne? The only time that you'll call it an amended one is after you have advertised in terms of Section 35 and you have to amend the account and re-advertise. That is, then you are going to call it an amended account. Are we together? When will you call an account a supplementary account? That is if
there's an asset that you add on and you just want to just tell the master who there's an additional asset that you received after you've advertised the account, I think.
That is, in most cases, once you have finalized your process, and before you are discharged by the master, and then you discover that there is this asset that you did not know that comes to your attention, then you're going to draft the account, including only that asset, and call that account a supplementary account. Ne? So when we ask you these short questions, when will you call an account a supplementary account, you must know that. Ne? When you deal with an additional asset. Yes. Yes.
I have a situation where an estate was closed many years ago, so there's a net-based investment that was never dealt with.
Yes.
So what type of account am I supposed to
Supplementary account. That's correct, yes. Ne? Regulation 5.1b, we have emphasized. Now the regulation does not stipulate what type of money column you should provide. It's up to you. Double column or triple column is up to you, as long as there is a money column where you're going to reflect your assets and liabilities. Others used a double column, the left-hand side for the credit, not for the debit, and the right-hand side for the credit. Ne? Some use that double column, but the left-hand side, they use it for the subtotal, and the right-hand one, they use it for the grand total. It's up to you, as long as we have a money column. Liquidation account, very important. That is Regulation 5.1c. Let's deal with it straight away. Let me just bring this here. Is it fine? For the purpose of the examination, ladies and gentlemen, if you get this part right, you have passed. There's no way you can fail, because from Regulation 5.1c, that all of this, more or less all of them, will refer back to Regulation 5.1c, being the liquidation account. The liquidation account. We are drafting the liquidation account, ladies and gentlemen, guided by Regulation 5.1c. What does Regulation 5.1c says? Here, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to give an account to the assets of the deceased as at the date of death. Ne? All the income after date of death will come later under Regulation 5.1f, income and expenditure account. But as at the date of death, all those assets and liabilities are referred here in the liquidation account, Regulation 5.1c. Now, Regulation 5.1c, like we have said, firstly, maybe I should use this other pen. Firstly, we must deal with the assets. I would like us, for the purpose of the exam, even if you use this style in practice, it will help you. Firstly, let's deal with the skeleton. What will your liquidation account look like? Start with the skeleton. We'll provide meat into the skeleton later. Where will you get the meat from? From the set of facts in the exam. Ne? Firstly, we deal with the assets. Then we're going to deal with what? Liabilities. That will be number 2 on our skeleton. Liabilities. Then we are going to deal also with what? Estate duty payable. Estate duty payable. Ne? Number 4. The last part will be the balance available for distribution. I'll just abbreviate here. So our skeleton will more or less look like this. assets, liabilities, estate duty, payable, and the amount that is left will be the balance for distribution. Ne? Okay. By the way, we said here we are dealing with what? The assets and liabilities as at the date of death. Let's look at the assets. Ne? Regulation 5.1c Roman figure 1 says, under your assets, you must have the subheading referred to as immovable property. Immovable property. Yeah? You are required by the regulation to have this subheading. It's not me. Yeah? Regulation 5.1c Roman figure 2 says you must have a subheading called movable property. Are we together? Yeah. Now, in practice, we have developed another subheading under assets. We call it what? Claims in favor of the estate. Claims in favor of the estate. Did you hear what I said? In practice, we have developed this subheading. It means that this subheading is not provided by the regulation. But for our own convenience, we have decided to put in claims in favor of the estate. Now, I'll give you an explanation. Now, under our assets, in the immovable property, movable property, and claims in favor of the estate, we are going to add all those values together for us to arrive at what? Total assets. Therefore, that will tell you that your total assets are made up of the values of immovable property, movable property, and claims in favor of the estate. Are we together? Okay. Then, under our major subheading, liabilities. Regulation 5.1c Roman figure 6 says we must have a subheading called what? Administration expenses. Administration expenses. Ne? Regulation 5.1c Roman figure 7 says we must have a subheading called what? Claims against the estate. Ne? So when we add the values of these two subheadings, we arrive at what? Total liabilities. Total liabilities. There we are. From total liabilities, Regulation 5.1c Roman figure 8 is the one that gives us that we must reflect the estate duty payable. Ne? Therefore, from our total assets, we are going to minus or pay the liabilities. We are going to minus or pay estate duty. The amount that is left is the balance available for distribution that we are going to carry forward to the distribution account. Ne? So that should tell you that from the assets of the deceased, before we can know how much is left for the beneficiaries, we must pay the liabilities and estate duty. So this is your skeleton of your liquidation account. If you use this skeleton, you will never go wrong. In practice, the meat, the information that will go here is inside your file. In the examination, the information that will come here is in the set of facts. Are we together? Now, you'll notice that whatever we have done here, this skeleton was drafted as guided by the regulation itself. We have been quoting the regulation. So it is not our decision. Ne? We are complying with the regulation. Now let us provide meat into this skeleton. What type of meat will go into this skeleton? Yeah? Now we have our set of facts. When we come to the assets, immovable property, when you look at your set of facts, what will be an immovable property? Either a house or a farm or sectional title. Are we together? There's nothing difficult. Information is given to you in the set of facts. By now you know what is an immovable property. Ne? Now we'll give you the value of this immovable property. Please don't disappoint us and give us another value. You are not a valuator. Ne? The value that we give to you, we are going to reflect in your money column. Ne? So therefore, if you look at Regulation 5.1c Roman figure 1 says, under the immovable property, describe the immovable property the way it is described in the title deed. So when we say the deceased had a house in Pretoria, in your liquidation account, don't say house number 145 Sunnyside. You won't get a mark for that because you did not comply with the regulation. The regulation says described it as per the title deed. In practice, it's so simple. You just take out the title deed from your file and copy there. No, not copy. Adults don't copy. You refer and refer in your title deed. Ne? The full description. I think now we have dealt with assignment number 1, module 2, ne? Together with the second one. Most of you have fully described the immovable property correctly as per the title deed. But if you say house number 145 Sunnyside, it won't give you a mark. Do you want me to give you a view of what we are talking about? Or you know it? Full description. You know the full description by now. Oh, wonderful. So you describe the immovable property as per the title deed. Ne? And then we are going to state the value. Immediately after the full description, you put the value. Aha. Ah, no, we are passing.
1 million.
Ne? Now, yes, we give you the value. Ne? After the value, you have to provide what we call a divestment note. A divestment note is very important. A divestment note is required by Regulation 5.1c Roman figure 5. Regulation 5.1c Roman figure 5 says, under immovable property, reflect how you intend to divest this property. In other words, who is going to get this property? Ne? Yes. So you know that this house will go to the surviving spouse either in terms of the will or in terms of the law of intestate succession. We are required by the, and that is why we allocate a mark for the divestment note. It is a requirement of the regulation. Are we together? In terms of the distribution, not redistribution. In terms of the distribution account, still fine. Ne? Yes. Because in the distribution account, we are going to explain it in full.
No,
Ne?
my question is, if it's in terms of redistribution agreement, do we say to be awarded to the spouse in terms of redistribution?
Oh. It will say it's going to be awarded to the spouse in terms of section 11C of the Interstate Succession Act, read together with the redistribution agreement. Ne? Yes. So it's either it's in terms of the will or the Interstate Succession Act, but read together with the redistribution agreement. Yes. Yes.
With our L&D, at the top we write immovable property and then the description. Next to immovable property, we wrote awarded as for distribution ground.
Yes.
But we didn't get a mark for those.
Ah.
So we didn't put it at the bottom after the description to because there's
Under
two
immovable property.
Yeah. And even with the movable property, those who are awarded by distribution.
It's not a problem. Once, after this class, once you notice these things, write back to us and let us correct that. Nah? Yeah, there's no problem. Then you have a divestment note. So it's either going to have a farm or a house. A house is described as an earth. If it's not an earth, then it's a house. An earth is measured in square meters. A farm in hectares. So don't forget those distinctions. Yeah? But then if some of us have described the farm, because there was a farm and a house, they've described the earth in full, but the farm, they just took shortcuts. It doesn't work like that. All of them must be fully described. Ne? Yes. Are we fine with immovable property, what we're talking about? Then come movable property. Anything that is not immovable, it is movable. Not so? Yes. But then, under movable, we are deciding to distinguish between those assets that are awarded as they are and those that are turned into cash. Therefore, that is why we have claims in favor of the estate. But all of these are movable assets. They are not immovable. Why do we do that? It's convenient for us. Under movable assets, we decide to put all those assets that are valued. In other words, those that are not turned into cash. Under claims in favor of the estate, we reflect all those assets that are turned into cash or that are cash. Are we together? Why? We are also guided by Regulation 5.1c Roman figure 5, which says what? An asset that is awarded as it is, it must have a divestment note, because we want to know who's going to get this furniture that is not sold, who's going to get this motor vehicle as it is. Now you're going to reflect that under what? Divestment note. But Regulation 5.1c Roman figure 5 does not require a divestment note under assets that are cash.
But if the immovable that are awarded are going to about 50 people, do we have to say awarded to the son, to the brother, to the uncles, or do I just say as per distribution?
As per distribution account. In the distribution account, we are going to deal with them fully. Ne? Yes. As long as we won't ask you to, or maybe we won't give you facts that have 50 beneficiaries, we won't do that to you. That will be cruel of us. 50 is too much. Ne? Yes. So therefore, that is why we distinguish between those that are only valued, because these ones we are going to provide what? A divestment note and tell us who's going to get these properties that are not turned into cash. But those that are turned into cash, we don't require a divestment note as per the regulation. That is why, and this part is going to make it easy for us when we deal with the recapitulation statement to see what are the assets that consist of cash. Are we together? Yes. Any questions so far?